So today's lesson is dividing decimals by just whole numbers. So in your divisor, each time today you're going to be seeing whole numbers 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 100. So the divisor is not going to have a decimal. That's going to be the next lesson that we learn. So for today, we're going to be dividing, again, decimals by whole numbers. If you can look on page 551, we're going to start with example number 1. It says there are 8.4 meters left on a roll of ribbon. Nancy wants to cut the ribbon in half. What will be the size of each piece of ribbon? So if we're cutting something in half, we're dividing by 2. So that's how they were able to get this whole number of 2. Because it didn't necessarily give you that second number, but you had to know that if you're dividing something in half, you're cutting it into 2 pieces. Okay, so it's divided by 2. The first thing that they wanted you to do to make sure that your answer is going to be reasonable is to estimate. So they rounded this one to 8. They kept this one as 2. 8 divided by 2 is 4. So your estimate is 4. So your real answer should be very close to 4. So when we're dividing with decimals in the dividend, all you have to do with the decimal point is bring it straight up. So this is really where neatness comes into play, because if you're not neat and your numbers are not organized and you don't write them one on top of the other and you line up the digits correctly, then your whole problem is going to kind of be off because your decimal point might not be in the right spot. So you need to just bring the decimal point straight up. That's always the first thing that I do so that I don't forget about it later on. So I like to bring it straight up and then I'm done with it. Then you say, how many times does 2 go into 8? It goes in 4 times. 4 times 2 is 8. I subtract. I bring down my 4. And I say, how many times does 2 go into 4? And it goes in 2 times. And you'll notice that the number 2 would be on the right side of the decimal point. So your answer is 4.2. 4.2 is close to the estimate, which was 4. So your answer is correct. And again, you can always check with multiplication. You can multiply the quotient by the divisor. So if we did 4.2 times 2, we would end up getting 84, but then remember, you need to count the decimal places when we're multiplying with decimals. You say, okay, there's 1 decimal place here. There's no decimal places here. 1 plus 0 is 1, so I'm going to start on the right and I'm going to move it over 1 decimal place. So my answer is 8.4, and you check to make sure that those answers are the same. So now if you can turn to page 552, we'll look at example number 2. They wanted you to find $6.54 divided by 12. Again, this is a completely whole number, so we don't have to do anything with it. All we have to do with this decimal point is bring it straight up. And again, be neat, make sure you line up your digits, line up your decimal point, bring it straight up. So now we say, how many times does 12 go into 6? 12 does not go into 6, so we put a 0 here. 0 times 12 is 0. We subtract, we still get 6. We bring down our 5. Okay? So now you have to say, how many times does 12 go into 65? And if you did some math up the side, if you couldn't think in your head the 12 times tables right away, you could kind of take a guess, right? We'll say, okay, let's try 5. 12 times 5 is going to be 60. So that's going to be our answer. We're going to put our 5 here. 5 times 12 is 60. I subtract. I get 5. Now I bring down my 4. Okay? And then you have to say, how many times does 12 go into 54? And again, you may want to do some work off to the side. 12 times 4 is going to give you 48. So it's going to go in. And when you subtract, you're going to get 6. Okay? Now, if you notice in your book, we can't have remainders anymore with decimals. So 5th grade, we are done with remainders. At this point, what you need to do is you need to add a 0 on here. If I have a leftover number down here, I can't just leave it. I can't now write remainder 6, because you can't have decimals and remainders. So what I have to do here is now I'm going to add a 0, and I'm going to bring it all the way down to the next spot. Okay, so now I say, how many times does 12 go into 60? Well, we did that math before. It's still right here. We know that it goes in 5 times. 5 times 12 is 60. Now we're not going to have any other numbers at the bottom because 60 minus 60 is going to be 0. So my answer is 0.545. But again, if you get stopped and you still have a number down here left over, technically if you still have a remainder, you need to keep going with your math, which means annex a 0, bring it down. And sometimes you have to annex another 0 and bring it down. And eventually it will go in evenly, or it'll ask you to round to a certain tenths place, hundredths place, thousandths place, whatever the question's asking. So that's why it's really important to make sure that you read the directions. Okay, if you have any questions, let me know. You're not going to do the My Homework pages today. You're just going to do independent practice and problem solving. My homework pages will be tomorrow, so don't worry about those right now.